Hello and welcome back to the Gamemode game mode tutorial making series blah 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 blah. And I believe we are on part 8, where we will be making the drop and the use commands for items in our inventory and actually finish the inventory part of our game mode. It's been a while since I made the last tutorial, but bear with me guys, I've had a lot of things to do on private and on school, so yeah, but I hope I'll be able to push out loads of tutorials right now, because I have a couple of months off. So yeah, let's just go ahead. Open your Gamemode game mode directory, where we last worked. We were making the inventory menu, I believe, and some items. And now we need to add, we actually have the buttons for the drop and the use commands for each item, but they don't do anything quite yet. So today we will be trying to make items drop on the ground, and one should be able to use them and or pick them up. So let's go ahead. We have to do quite a lot in one of the files, and that is under the database folder that we made, and database.lua. First of all, we need to make a network string. If you remember what that was, you probably don't. We had to declare a couple of names for this network sending method, where we send data between the client and the server. And in order for it to work, we needed to declare the names. So here we had a database network string already declared, and it was used to send the table of items that you have in your inventory to the client as a big string. Now we need at least 2 more network strings to send the command from the server or from the client, depending if we want to drop or use an item. So util.add network string. This is just how the coder, probably Garry, I don't really know who actually codes this. Maybe the community, I haven't looked into it, but they have said that you need to declare the names for each networked string, each kind of stream of data that you want to use. So we're gonna call this one inventory drop. So this will send shit when we want to drop stuff, or send stuff when we want to drop shit. It's up to you. It's up to you. And we just copy paste that line and change drop to use. So we also have a stream for the use information. Then we need to go to the bottom of our file, I believe, and put some additional functions into our script. There's a lot of things that's going on the server side of the use and the drop functions. To make our life easy, we're going to make a couple of general functions, which include inventory save and inventory get. These functions will just save and return the inventory with a simple function. So apply, which is the player entity, so this function has to be called upon a player. You have to have a player entity. A certain player has to call this function in order for it to work. Inventory save. And we need an argument inside our function called I, depending on what on the 'Because the I is going to be the large table of of items which you have in your inventory, and you want to put that inside the inventory value of that player. Very hard to explain. So if there's no inventory in the argument, then return end. We don't need to save anything because there's no inventory. Self is basically apply, the same as apply in this function. Self is the meta table, I think that's the name of it, that the function is being written to. So apply is the same as self, and self is the same as apply in this matter. Easily explained. Database set value. This function already exists. If we have it up here, and that just puts a value inside the saving table. Remember, the table that has all the values for a player that you want, including tables. So we want to set I, which is the inventory, as the inventory. So inventory, comma I. There we go, and that function is done. Now we need a function to return the inventory in case if we need to look at our inventory easily. Function apply inventory get. Don't misunderstand me. This is not a function to open a menu or anything. This is just in the code to be able to look at the table of the inventory in the code, not anything user interfacey or anything like that. So local I equals the inventory of the player, so self dot no database, oh, not big, a little b, lowercase b, I mean, database get value inventory and return I. I like to use semicolons because I've been coding C++ for half a year now, but I'm not gonna use it. I'm just kidding with ya. Now I guess we're ready to go ahead on the advanced stuff to check if we have an item, and if so, we can drop it. And we also need to make a function to check if an item is being aimed at, and in that case you have to choose if you want to pick it up or use it. So let's start off with the has function item, the has item function, I mean, to check if the player has an item in the inventory. So apply inventory has item name amount. So the arguments of this function is the name of the item and the amount of that item that you want to check if you have. So you can, for example, check if you have 2 sodas, and if you do, it returns true, and if not, it returns false. Simple and dandy, as I like to say. If not amount, then amount equals 1 end. So if we forget to put amount in the argument of this function, we just put amount to 1. Local I, which is the inventory, is of course self inventory get. If I then, so if we have an inventory, and if the inventory has the item, then I have a little cheat note so I don't forget anything. I usually make lots of bugs and everything, so I need to look at a code I've already tested just in case, because inventories, they are advanced. If the item has an amount larger than the amount we specified, then return true. But if we don't have that amount of that particular item, then return false. And if we don't have the item in the inventory, return false. And I guess we just return false if we don't have an inventory too, because then we don't have the item. False. There we go. The function is complete. Let's move over to the next one. Save, Control S, that's very important. Then we can add a function to take away an item from the inventory, to remove an item. I don't want to call it remove item because it wouldn't be the right thing in the context that we're going to use it for. Just, oh, what was that? trust me. Function apply, which is the entity, inventory take item, name and amount of that item. At the end to be sure that we don't forget it. And again, we just copy paste this line to check if I just put it the amount to 1 if we forget to specify it. Also, copy paste this line. We need the inventory, which is going to be I. And now we can use the function that we just made. If self, which is the player, inventory has item, name and amount, then if we have the item in the inventory, we can take away that item from the inventory. So there we go. Put an end on the if statements, very important. You can't forget the ends. Everything has an end. If the item that we specified has an amount, which is since we're going to remove a certain amount of that item from our inventory, we take that amount which we have on that item already in the inventory and change it to name.amount, the original amount minus the amount we want to remove. Self inventory save. So we need to save the inventory now, because if we don't, people can just remove items, log out, log in again, and they still have the item they removed. So remember to save the inventory when you do changes to it. And return true because we've taken away the item and everything was okay. If not, if the person doesn't have the item in their inventory, we return false because we didn't remove anything. Very good function right there. It's nifty. Right, so the next function is going to be the inventory give item, which is going to add an item to the inventory. For example, we will need this function when the player picks up a new item. Function apply in, oh, not a high letter, is that the name? Capital letter, I mean. High letter. Inventory give item, name and amount, the same arguments as always. Then we just copy paste the 2 lines from the previous function. Amount is going to be 1. And yeah, if you forget to specify it, as I've told you several times, and I is going to be the inventory in this function. Then we also specify the item, because we're going to use it a lot. Item equals get items name. The get items function was a function which returned the information about an item from a name. If not item, then return end, because if that item doesn't exist in our database, then we don't want to do anything more. Anymore, I guess that's a proper way to say it. If amount equals just 1, then now we're going to use a funny function. And it's called print message. So self print message HUD print talk. HUD print talk is the chat, as far as I remember, and we can put text inside it. So you received a ... and the value item name. So you received a soda, for example. We just press enter, and we're going to have a little bit of else if right here on top of this whale Russ. Else if amount is larger than 1. If there's more than just 1 item that was given to this player, then we need to say it in plural, I guess. I don't really know the English name for more than 1 in this context. You received amount, a space, item name, which is for example going to be soda, but since we're saying it in plural, or more than one soda, like sodas, we need to add an S at the end of this line, and an exclamation mark, something like that. I suck in English. Control S. Then we press enter. That line is complete. Mondo. I can extend this panel right here so you can see. There's an end. But we haven't given the player anything yet. We've fooled him. We've just put a text there, but not given him anything yet. So let's give him something. Self. Yes, right. I was just thinking. I had a brain dogs, if you know what it is. Inventory has item, name, amount. So if we have the item already in the inventory, we can use the table to just add more of this item to it. Hard to explain. Plus amount. But if it's not in our inventory, we need to make that amount value for our item in our inventory. Name equals, so we make the item inside our inventory and we add the amount value to amounts. There we go. So amount is going to be amount. For example, if we put amount to 4, amount is going to equal 4. And of course, don't forget to save the inventory. Self inventory save. There we go. Oh man, I just noticed a bug. See, there's a bug. It's only going to be 2 dots. And that doesn't look good. And I guess that's good for now. Control S. Let's continue with our functions. We need to handle a couple of networked data, which we talked about in the start of this tutorial. So if we receive information about, for example, that the player wants to drop an item, we need to handle that information and make the player actually drop something. So net.receive inventory drop. So if the inventory drop stream receives some data from the client, it will do this. Just ignore the len and ply. That is actually just the data and who sent it. Local name equals net read string. So the name of the item that we want to drop is in the string that we sent. If player inventory has item, if we have that item and we have more than one of it, then player or we have one of it, inventory take item, and we take the item from the inventory, remove it, and then we create the item with the player and the item name and the item spawn pos apply. The item spawn pos function will receive or return the position of item spawn pos. Will return the position which the player is aiming at. Yes. Not much more to say about that. I'm sorry. A little more brain dogs. There we go. And end bracket. Then we want to process the received data for the inventory use also. So let's change this. I just copy pasted the function. Use. We need the name of the item we want to use, and we want the information about the item. Get items name. And if the item we are trying to use exists at all, and if the player inventory has item name 1, then apply inventory take item name 1. And then we want to call the use function for that particular item. and use it on the player. This is a function that is written inside the database for the item. Oh, sorry, didn't notice the if thing there. Okay, then we just end it all. Here we go. And we're nearly there. We're getting quite close, actually. Now we're going to use a local variable inside this file called IDD, which is going to count each new item that we make on the server. It does not account for removing of, like if a player picks up the item again, it will not change this ID. It will only add a new number each time a item is dropped on the server. So create item, apply name pos. Those are the three arguments for this function: the player that drops it, the name of the item, and the position of the item. Local item t is going to be get items name. If item t exists, then IDD equals IDD plus 1. We just add 1 to that register number to keep track of how many items that has been dropped. Local item equals ends create item t dot end, which is going to be the entity name for the particular item. If you remember what that was, set env string, a networked string to the object. Name is going to be the item t name. And then I guess we just copy paste that a couple of times. Just once actually. And change it to item name. And just the name. Because it's not the print name, it's the actual item database name. Just copy paste again and change string to int. It's an integer, a number between 0 and infinite, but it has to be like 0, 1, 2, 3. UID and IDD. So we can look up how many items that have been spawned before this particular item. So we get a unique ID for each item. Set env bool, it's a boolean, which is either true or false. Pickup, so if this item pickupable, so will you be able to pick this item up? Oh, pickup true. This particular item is possible to pick up, so you can change this if you don't want items to be able to be picked up at certain settings. Then set pos of the item is going to be the position that we specify. Item set env entity, that's going to be the owner of the item, which is going to be the player again. So now we know who spawned it also, if we scan the item that we're looking at. Set skin, and we can, if the item doesn't have a skin in the database, like a number for the skin that we want to use, then we just put it to 0. And then we need to spawn the item we just made. Or was it item T? Oh yeah, it's the function for the spawn of that particular item. Apply item. It's also in the database. You can look it up. We did it in the previous tutorials. Spawn and item activate. This is to actually put the item inside the server to make it a legit item. Activate. If the item doesn't exist in the database, then return false. And did we remember a second? There we go. Now we have the create item function ready. So this will be used when we drop an item and we create a new